Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
Welcome to Board Gamers Anonymous, the podcast where everyone is welcome at the table, but of course, no one knows whose turn it is. This is Chris.
Hey, and this is Anthony.
And this is episode 511, Choose Your Table. We like to thank all our Patreon backers for helping us unlock a brand new episode, but especially our new producer, Paul. Paul, thanks so much, my friend. You rock. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode, and we're so glad that you joined us here at the table this week. For this week's feature, it's going to be all about choosing what table you're going to be gaming at this week. This is going to be our feature review. And again, as each and every week, we take all of your comments from all of the social media and we put it into our feature where we can battle it out. How you doing, Anthony?
Doing all right. I love this idea because these hypotheticals are always fun because I feel like everybody comes into it with like, well, obviously it's this, which is like half the answers we got. It's like, well, obviously this. And I have my own obviously this, but then the other half of people are like, well, obviously this. So it's kind of a fun back and forth. I don't know that you and I are going to be on different sides of it, so it's not quite as fun, but maybe in the future we'll find one where we disagree and we can also just have an argument. Just drag out fight.
Yeah, I think on the most fundamental issue of our time is you're going to a meetup, you're going to a game night, you're going to a convention, and there's two tables. And I think we do a lot of this when we try to pick out our top 10 list, Anthony, when we're trying to figure out which game would we rather or which game would we like, or even when we do our reviews and we talk about which games would we play versus which games we would dodge. Dodge games are not necessarily a bad game, but for some reason we would rather dodge it for another table. And we've all been in that situation where you got to choose a table, man.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and there's honestly sometimes it's like two games that I really like, but I'm like, what kind of a mood am I in today? Right? Or how much time do I have? Or who's sitting at the table right now? You know, like, oh, that's a really combative game that I love, but I don't know that I want to play it with that particular individual because they get super salty when we play games like this. Like there's all those factors that kind of come in, which is like why it's cool to ask everybody their thoughts because we can kind of hit all those factors.
Exactly.
Bring those up, right?
Yeah.
Like, I would pick this because of this. I'm like, oh, that's a good point because of this. So yeah, I think we all have to make this decision sometimes. Sometimes we are the ones setting up the table and other people get to make the decision about joining us or not, which is a little more self-conscious. But it's pretty frequent. You know, you have a lot of games options, a lot of different things you have to take into consideration. And I think most of it happens subconsciously. So it's kind of fun to talk it out.
Speaking of that, I we just talked about this before we got into the podcast. There was two tables at my most recent meetup, and it was SETI versus Unconscious Minds.
Oh my goodness.
And I was just like, I don't want to make this decision. Just like, I was like, gotta make
These are both real good games from last year, and they're about the same length. Which one am I going to play?
But we'll have to keep that for a future episode. But I was quite challenged with that. And again, you have new tables and new people at the tables and new games, and yeah, it was a bit of a challenge. I ended up playing Unconscious Mind because my group needed someone to teach. So took a bullet for the team, man. Took a bullet.
Oh, you did it, man. You did it.
I did it. I got to do a thing. So taught a bunch of games, had a bunch of fun, and it's always good to see people at the table. But yeah, we always have to make that decision. So we'll talk about that in our feature review. But before we get into that, Anthony, let's talk about what's going on and the state of play with BGA.
Yeah. So we mentioned this last week. It's coming up pretty soon. We're going to be at the Level Up Retreat. We are special guests. We'll be there along with a bunch of other podcasters and content makers.
Mhm.
All weekend. We'll be there from January 31st to February 2nd. And
Friday,
it'll be a lot of
Saturday, and
fun.
Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah. So join us if you're in the area. Stop on by, say hi.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll actually be doing a panel presentation on tabletop gaming and neurodiversity, accessibility, mental health, and a bunch of other different factors. Last year, when we did this panel, we had some really great people on with us. And it was just really a great time because a lot of people have questions about getting games to the table with different groups or trying to bring people from a diverse background of different mental health status or elder family members to the game table, and they need games that are actually going to work. And I think that's also a challenge that we like to discuss, because I think there's a lot of ideas and there's a lot of obvious answers, but that don't always work out. And sometimes with our family and friends, if the game doesn't hit the first time, they're not coming back.
Right.
So, hopefully we can, provide some expertise and also crowdfund a lot of answers on that too. So if you're at Level Up for this convention, I think we're going to be doing that around Friday at 12 or 1. So you can join us for that particular panel. And for the rest of the weekend, we'll be there to game. So please join us at the table.
Woo! I'm excited.
It's a game convention Anthony's allowed to play games at.
Yeah, it's gonna be so much fun. I'm gonna bring stuff. We're gonna play it. I'm gonna yell at people if we don't play it. They're like, "No, we're playing games." What do you mean you're going for food? Order something. We're playing games.
That's going to be another, choose your table. Anthony's at one table. Chris is at another table, but Anthony brought his games personally. You're like, uh-oh.
Yeah. Which situation do you want? I just want to play a game. So so yeah, definitely check us out there if you're going to be in the area. The other big thing that we're doing, which is actually already launched, so it's happening, folks. Is the BGA Fantasy Board Game Draft. We mentioned this last week. It's full. We have 10 people, 10 teams. They are going to be drafting or have already drafted or maybe are in the process of drafting starting January 18th, which is a couple days ago. So we will have the full breakdown of who drafted what and when and how will be posted to our Discord and Facebook channel or page. So you can check those out. And we're going to be updating you all on what that looks like, what the final draft was in 2 weeks on episode 513. So
That's
we'll have
exciting.
our first month one update. We'll go look through and see which games are on the hotness. We'll talk about which games we think will make the hotness. We'll talk about people's different draft picks and what kind of like breakdowns that looks like. It's a lot of fun. If you still want to participate, we had a few people who've asked. We're trying to see if we can put a second one together. If not, we're also talking about potentially doing like a summer draft of games that get announced later in the year. Definitely reach out if you're interested. Don't feel like, oh, I missed it, I'm out, I can't do this. We're gonna make stuff happen because it's fun and we're looking forward to it. So hopefully you are all as well.
Yeah, especially join us on patreon.com/BGA, where you can join up, put yourself on the wait list, and join the next draft. And if you're not on Patreon, you can still follow along with us on our episodes here live as we talk about more of the fun tabletop gaming that's going on. And you can root for your favorite team. Hopefully it's BGA, but we wouldn't.
It's true.
We
We'll
won't
see
be
what we
offended.
draft. I don't know.
You can find your favorite team based upon the games that they drafted and see if you have a favorite team in that race, and you can follow them along through their journey of trying to gain the most hotness possible.
Yeah. It's gonna be fun, and I'm looking forward to see what people pick because I like looking through the list. There's not a lot of like obvious number ones.
No.
There's a couple big miniature games that'll probably be up on the list for a while, but other than that, it's like a lot of stuff from like I don't know what the hotness is going to be this year.
Sure.
But then you also get companies that like shadow drop stuff, like Finspan just kind of got announced and then it's shipping 2 weeks later. It didn't make our list because Stonemeyer announced it after we built our list. So what games like that pop up that aren't even on the list? We'll see. And those take up spots in the hotness. So
It's true. And then also a lot of games that come out that year, sometimes that year is a year for blank.
right.
So maybe it's a drafting year, maybe it's a miniature year. Maybe it's a year, as you mentioned, where FinSpan comes out, so maybe it sucks out all the oxygen for tableau builders.
Right.
Because if you're going to play a tableau builder, maybe you're going to play FinSpan and not play something else that just recently came out. So
Right.
there's a lot of different dynamics and, numbers to crunch along the way. And then some of it's just luck. A game kind of blows up out of nowhere and scores you all the points.
Right. Yeah. Like, who knew that Harmonies would be one of the best selling games of 2024 before it released?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
hadn't even heard of it until like May of last year. So.
Yeah. So there's a lot of factors going into all this. And again, it should be a lot of fun. A fun season for us all to enjoy together. So while football kind of wraps up, you got a new draft to follow and some favorite games and teams. And again, you get to check these games out on BGG and kind of stoke the flames a little bit too, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right, I think well that's what's going on with BGA, but our listeners out there want to let people know that the stuff that's going out on BGA is also very hot. How can they let people know what's happening?
Yeah. So you listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm sure if you're listening to us as well, everybody does this and we kind of forget sometimes, but like, we would love your feedback. We would love to hear from you. We would
It's true.
love not just like reaching out to me like you guys are awesome, but letting everybody else know we're awesome would be sweet. So this is us saying, stars and reviews, right? So five-star reviews on your podcast player of choice would be amazing. It helps other people find us. It helps us see that other people are listening. And we'll read those out on the show. So recent 5-star review we got from Travis Marie. Says, out of the dozen or so board game pods I listen to, this is the best. Something about these guys. Love their personalities and takes. Thanks, Travis.
Thank you so much,
We love you
Travis.
too.
Appreciate it. Yeah, this is really important as we deal with the impending doom of TikTok.
Yeah, sad.
So a lot of content producers out there, us included, work really hard to put content out there. It isn't easy, and it absolutely is positively not cheap. And certainly there is an audience out there. I know a lot of the TikTok trends is I'm going to keep putting this content out there until it finds an audience. But honestly, you can put the best content out there in the world. We certainly try to do that. I don't know if we exceed it, but we certainly try. But really, it comes down to an algorithm, and the algorithm is really based on clicking like and subscribing on YouTube, subscribing to whatever podcast player that you're currently on and listening. And certainly the 5-star reviews mean a lot. We're kind of funny about this. We're definitely more on the introvert side. We don't like to kind of champ and prop ourselves up, but it does make a radical difference. We've been on for 11 years, over 500 episodes for just this one podcast. And if you take a look at the number of reviews, it's pretty small because we generally don't incentivize this. But considering the crunch that's happening in social media these days, where seems to be on its last legs, TikTok is definitely on its last legs, even Facebook/Meta kind of crashing, at least its stock is at this point. So
Mhm.
it's hard to know what's going to be a thing out there that's going to be able to spread the word of tabletop gaming. And wherever we end up and however we end up getting to you, we really would appreciate you reaching back out to let people know because it makes a big difference to us and especially to all the companies out there. We want to review as many games as possible. But if they don't see engagement, if they don't see likes, if they don't see follows and all that kind of stuff that we don't generally like to talk about, uh, they don't tend to kind of connect. And we need those connections to get more content out there. So again, thank you ever so much for everyone who's already done that. Please continue to do so. Please encourage other people to do so. And if you haven't, please take a second right now, if you wouldn't mind. We'll wait. The podcast will wait. You can just hit the pause button right here and just drop a review. It means a lot to us. See what I did that in real time, man?
Yeah.
All right. So that's everything that's going on with the state of play with BGA. Anthony, let's get on to the games we want to talk about. Let's roll for our preview.
All right. So I'm on the hot seat this week for our roll for preview, and I want to talk about a game. Honestly, I don't usually talk about games like this or mention them on the show because they're big, they're expensive, they're tons of miniatures, and at this point, I don't have the shelf space. But this particular game is based on an old video game that I used to love. More recent iterations of this are not great, but it's a classic. Have you ever played Master of Orion?
I have not.
You haven't. Okay.
I know,
So
right?
it's a big, it's one of those big sprawling 4X space games, right?
Sure.
one of the big things about it is that you play as one of 10 different alien races, which are all very different. So, like, if you think like Stellaris, but not quite so intricate, maybe a little more Sid Meier, and you've got all these different alien races kind of guiding your playstyle. That's kind of what you get with Master of Orion. It's cool.
Is it a true 4X?
Some of the versions of it are, yes.
Okay.
It's one of those games that's been around long enough that they try to revive it every now and then. And
gotcha.
there are certain releases that are better than others. I'm trying to remember there's the 2016 one that's on. You can still get it. It looks like on Steam, although it doesn't run on our recent computers. It looks like
Sure.
So,
okay.
You get into that phase of like the games are like 10, 15 years old, and then do they run okay? Who knows? But there are several of these, and they all kind of follow the same formula. So 4X, sprawling. Like if you look at a map of it, it's got like it's the galaxy, and there's 400 planets, and they're all like linked together, and you're kind of interweaving between them. There's big tech trees and all that good stuff.
Yeah, it's got a look of like Eclipse 2 / Twilight Imperium with those kind of major large hexes with little hexes in it.
Yeah. So the board game, and the funny thing is that there was a card game that came out, I don't know, almost 10 years ago at this point, that I have downstairs.
Oh, okay.
And it has survived several purges of my home. Master of Orion, the board game. This was Cryptozoic, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's how far back it goes. Cryptozoic before they just started only doing toys. And it was good. I liked it a lot. Like the reviews are not amazing. I think it's like a 7 or something, but I've held on to this because I really enjoyed the asymmetry of it, because that's the thing, right? Like the 10 different races and how they're differ, which we talk about Twilight Imperium, Eclipse, they all have that, but this is kind of a unique to its own field. This is way 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 bigger than that. So that 2016 board game, I think it took like hour maybe to play, hour and a half. So it was good, but it didn't really fit the theme of Master of Orion, because it's like a 4X game. Like if you're playing a 4X PC game, you expect to be playing it for like 8 to 10 hours.
Sure.
Multiple saves, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So this is more of that, right? So like if you pull up the Game Found page and you look at just like the high level overview, it's a big long coffiny box. It's all the hexes. Each player's got like 4,000 things in front of them. It definitely looks, it's like you said, TI4 vibes.
Sure.
So, I don't know that I have space on my shelf for another one of these. I'm sure you don't either.
But it looks like you said like a TI4, but really what the play is more of like a civilization game.
Yeah.
So heavy more exploration on this.
Yeah, I think so it's got all 4 things, right? But like the main stuff you're doing, like you're exploring is a huge part, right? You're trying to spread out. Like the map itself, even like those hexes, it's a lot of different places to like stop off and do things. It's you're not like you're gonna battle. Obviously, combat's a big part of it, but exploration and building up and colonizing the world, that's a really big part of it as well. So it's less like the TI4. I feel like when we're talking about that direction, that's like more objective based, specific things you're trying to do to get victory points, which may or may not guide you into battle. Eclipse is very like Euro-y. This looks to be more traditional, like 4X-ish, like you said, like a Civ game.
Yes.
Which I don't know how that's, and maybe that's great, maybe it's not. I don't know. I don't know if I have a space on my table for another one of these, even if it's slightly different.
Yeah, I think again, and I'll talk about this with my actual play here this week. Is it you want a game that's similar enough that when other people get to the table, they can actually like make sense of it and want to play it? Because again, we're gonna have some battle of tables here today. So like if this is somewhat recognizable and the mechanics are somewhat also something I played previously, I'm on board. And I think publishers really like that. But also at the same time, for people who purchase tabletop games and not necessarily a collector of games, then you kind of run into the risk of like, this is so similar to something else that I already have. And since it's so massive with all the expansions and the big box and stuff like that, maybe I don't need this. Maybe I already have this at home in some way. So it's one of those kind of critical junctures between you want something that's identical and something that I know, but also at the same time you do want something different. And I guess that's a challenge for almost everybody out there these days.
Yeah, yeah, and so, like, I'm digging through the videos, I'm digging through the GameFound stuff, I'm like, "How different is this?"
Yes.
You know? Like, it's got the IP, obviously, I like the IP because I've liked the video game. That's unique to me, though, like, if I bring this to my friend's house, if I bring it to your house, like, are you gonna be like, "Cool, this thing," because you don't know what it is. Um,
And sometimes that makes up for lack of gameplay too.
yeah, so, like, I don't wanna be, like, blinded to that, but, like, I love Master of Orion,
Yeah.
cool video game, and this is a company too, like, I was looking up Archon. I don't think I own any of their games, but I was looking up what they've done. They've done Wolfenstein the board game, Heroes
He-Man.
of Might and Magic 3, Masters of the Universe. Like, this is
Yeah.
the type of stuff they do. Um, they've done other games too, but like those are 3 of the more recent ones. So like
Mhm.
they're doing IPs and people are giving them lots of money for it. I'm like, are the games good though? I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, people seem to be liking Heroes of Might and Magic 3.
Okay. I know I'm
So
familiar with that. I played that.
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Uh, so I don't know. It could be cool. Like, and one of the really cool things I like about Master of Orion, and like the board game seems to does do it pretty well here, is it's not super military focused. Like, there's a whole diplomacy
Sure.
element to it, right? It's like influence and diplomacy and like working within other systems, which I think a lot of 4X games are bad at. Um,
Yeah.
like most 4X games are like military and money. That's how you win. Like everything
Sure.
else, culture, politics, religion, meh. Just blow stuff up.
There you go.
Um, so if that works, because that's a cool thing you can claim, but if it works, that would be unique. I would
Oh
like
yeah.
that. That's a different thing. Like you can go in and like negotiate your way out of a situation. That could be very cool.
Yeah, and again, I think with a lot of these, crowdfunding kind of games here, if it does have an IP that people know and like, then it's one of those situations where it's kind of like an almost a safe bet. And
Hmm.
I think that's what a lot of people want to see more than being concerned about necessarily like as far as the gameplay is concerned.
Right.
So I think Anthony, am I correct here? $199?
Yeah. So they're saying you can get all the stuff for $200.
Sure.
They're claiming it's 335 retail. I know those numbers are just made up. So
That's made up.
yeah, it's a lot of stuff. Like you look at the picture, it is a lot of stuff in the box, but I don't think it's like an obscenely amount more than like a TI4 and Eclipse, and those games are not $350.
No, that's what I'm
So
saying. Again, the IP it's an IP nonetheless. It's not a
it
big
is.
IP, but
Yeah.
I mean, if this was a Star Wars game, would 335 make sense if it was this game? Maybe 250?
S- Still no, but yeah.
No. Yeah. I mean
Yeah.
I
And
mean
they are doing this annoying thing too. You've got all these extra boxes and stuff, and I'm just like, just put it all in the box, man. Like it's just too much random things.
it's fine.
Like they have expansions they've already announced and
I
they're kind of
know.
all listed out, and I'm like, the game doesn't even exist yet, and you've got this. It's probably like a 6-hour game, and you're telling me there's expansions that I haven't even 3 expansions. I mean, come on, don't do that.
It's again, it's trying to show the value. Like this will have last to it.
Yeah,
Again, every game wants to be a lifestyle game, and I mean, for publishers, they certainly do. And again, with these crowdfunding sources too, they want you to perceive all of this extra value to a game. And again, most of us, if not all of us, know that. Again, I'm probably the biggest, uh, person for this, buying all the expansion stuff, but oftentimes not getting the expansion stuff to the table. So, like I talked about playing Unconscious Mind last week, and I did not get a chance to play the Nightmare expansion, um, you know, this week because again, new players.
yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, there's some cool animation here on the page itself, but yeah, no, if this is certainly nostalgic, this is really great that this is out there, and they've already surpassed their goal by like crazy amounts of money. Because again, the
yeah,
goal is like 40,000, and they're already almost at $700,000. So
yeah. They'll
this,
do fine.
yeah,
It's a big 4X game. Like it looks nice. The artwork's good. It's based on an IP people like.
and it looks pretty straightforward. Like the factions have their own color, and the board pieces. It doesn't look anything problematic to the production itself.
No, and it is an established company that has delivered multiple big, huge, epic miniature based games.
Yes.
Whether the games were great or not, I don't know, but it they do deliver what they're saying they're going to deliver. So it's just games like this, though, man. I wish, like, you get a TI4, right?
Yeah.
They launch that game. You're like, okay, I'm gonna go pick that up. It's $150. It's a lot
Yeah.
of money, a lot of game in the box.
Yeah.
Played a bunch of times. They release an expansion. That expansion's $100,
Yeah.
but I've already played the game now, and I know that it's good, and I know that
Yeah.
this is going to add these things because they've told me, and I can decide whether to do that or not. A, a Kickstarter campaign like this, or a GameFound campaign like this, which is all of them now, and they're
Yes.
like, "Hey, here's a $150 game. Here, it takes 6 hours. There's all the stuff it can do.
Sure.
Has a lot of potential, right?" And you're like, "Yeah, cool. I want to check that out." Also, we have 3 expansions for it. I'm like, okay, but how do you know that those work with the game if nobody's played the game yet outside of your
Sure.
playtesters? Like,
And again, it's anytime a game's big, you're not getting as much play testing as you'd want, obviously, either.
right. And are you going to play with any of those expansions? Because
Mhm.
these big games, unless you have one group of people and you play it with them all the time, like I've played TI4, I don't know, maybe 10 times since I got it at Gen Con. I've never played with the expansion because I've yet to sit with the same group of people enough times that we all felt
Sure.
comfortable enough with the rules. I had the same problem with Food Chain Magnet. I'm like, I've played this game 20 something times, but it's always a different group of people.
Sure.
War of the Ring, same problem. I'm like, I never get these expansions in because you don't get the same people at the same
Sure.
table. So like, do I want to spend an extra $100 for 3 expansions I'm never going to play? Not really, but then I'm like, but when could I get them if I don't? And then
Yeah.
then I get mad because I'm like, this is the stupid crowdfunding thing getting under my skin. So
Yeah, no, it's what crowdfunding has become. And again, historically, or at least in this day and age, games are not seeing table time at all because they're not hitting retail in any kind of reasonable way. So unless you're backing it early, you're the only people getting to the table, but then no one else necessarily gets access to it because if they didn't back it. So it's a very weird kind of unique group of people because they had to back at the $200-$300 level, which is everything. And then if the game was smaller, if it was just the base game and it was, I don't know, $100, more people would have backed it.
yeah,
Or maybe it would have been easier to get to retail, or maybe it doesn't get to retail like Gloomhaven, right? At least initially, because it's so
yeah,
big.
true.
So it doesn't have a lot of copies out there. Because I see that a lot of times. A couple of friends of mine, they're showing me some of the miniature games that they backed, and I'm like, I've heard about this, but I don't know anyone who's had it, and I haven't seen it played anywhere.
Right.
So,
It's such a unique niche thing. Yeah.
yeah,
It's I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm not going to back it myself just because I'm on a pretty strict budget this year for game stuff. But you look at the consultants they brought on. They brought on Jason Matthews. He helped design Twilight Struggle,
nice.
all time game.
Hmm.
He played Master of Orion when it first came out, like 30 years ago. The original old school 4X in the 90s. They've got the producer of that original game who consulted on this as well. So there's a lot of people working on this, a lot of people who have insights, and I don't know. We'll see. It's just something about these campaigns now, man. They just rub me a little bit the wrong way, and it's like I don't think I would have backed it at 110 either. But maybe I would have been a little more interested if it wasn't
I
just
think
the typical game found.
again, and obviously not any designer or publisher needs to do this, but again, if this was on Board Game Arena or Tabletop Simulator, or if there was some sort of a small version print and play, just so people can get a sense of it, I think that'd
Yeah,
be very helpful. Or again, if they were able to get review copies out to independent reviewers instead of previews, because previews are nothing more than marketing commercials.
right.
So if there was more independent reviews, that would also be very helpful too. It's good to see that they have a very good team, but there has to be an entryway, an access point here.
Yeah.
This is the way it's going to be for quite some time.
Oh yeah, I know it's the way.
Yeah,
It's funny because we do this every now and then, and people will write in and be like, "Yeah, that's how it is," and I'm like, "I know that's how it is, but I want to
yeah.
complain about it every now and then."
Well, you want to
And
complain
it's
about it because you want the game, and
exactly that's what happens. I'm like, "I want this game," now I'm going to complain that I can't get it.
there you go. It's fine. It's
Yeah,
fine. Yeah, that makes
I got a
sense.
podcast. I'm allowed to complain. Yeah.
If not here, then where?
Exactly.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, you don't want me complaining? Go make your own podcast and complain
I
about how I
mean,
complain.
they should be honored. They should be pleased with the fact that you're so angry and upset about this because you want the game. it's just financially inaccessible because of all of the reasons which you stated, not to mention the shipping, but we won't even talk about the shipping.
Oh, I didn't look at the shipping.
Don't look at the shipping, man. Don't look. Look away.
What is
Turn
this?
away.
Shipping,
Oh, he's looking.
shipping. Oh my gosh.
See, I try, people, I try every week to get this guy not to look at the shipping.
I looked at the shipping. So, okay, so it's not $200. It's $250. Thank
Ooh.
you.
Oh, man.
Uh,
All right.
okay.
Well, I made Anthony sad. I tried, folks. You were there.
Okay,
You
well,
listened.
it just takes it definitely off the table. Like, okay, I'm not getting this at all. It's fine.
That's fine. But if you do have it in the future and you've listened to this episode, find Anthony because he will play it.
Yeah, I want to play. Let me play your game.
There you go. All right. Well, I want to talk about my role for review here this week, Anthony. I got to play a game. Like you were talking about games that are games that we've previously played in a past life. Well, I got to play Black Forest from Uwe Rosenberg. This game came out recently in 2024, and it's all about developing your glass making village in the Black Forest. So, it's an Uwe Rosenberg game, and Uwe Rosenberg is one of two people at all times. He is either all about the agriculture or he's all about polyominoes and tableau tiles and things. This time he's both. And he's done that too, of course.
Woo, both.
Yeah.
I love both.
It's not polyominoes. I don't want to get you too excited, but it is.
You just said both.
I know, but it's tiles on a board, and the tiles on the board are like how you place them is very particular. So
Right.
it's kind of like that. It's not weird shapes like Feast for Odin, but again, no game's like Feast for Odin.
I want weird shapes like Feast Road, man.
See, this is one of the things when I wanted to talk about this as a review, the first thing that popped into my head, Anthony, is we've played a lot of Uwe Rosenberg games in the past, and we have a deep and rich knowledge of Uwe Rosenberg's games, so we can talk Uwe for days, and we have. We did an episode about that, ranking his games, but it's not so much ranking his games as like there's like some sort of spectrum. There's some sort of chart that needs to be created because Uwe goes from like very heavy, crunchy farming games to certainly the lighter kind of stuff. And then on another axis, this other axis has all of his, like hardcore polyomino games down to just like more simple tiles on a board.
Right.
And this one is somewhat in the middle. Now, a lot of people, when they've talked about Black Forest coming out and, the designers themselves and the game itself, this comes from Capstone Games, and we have a review copy of this from Capstone. They talk about Glass Road from 2013. Glass Road is famously also about the same Black Forest and all the glass that was produced there within. And it's also about the simultaneous action selection that you're able to make once you're able to kind of like pick up your resources. So let me talk about the actual game. The actual mechanic here is worker placement. Very straightforward, Anthony, very basic. Uwe Rosenberg knows his worker placement. We've played his worker placement in a lot of games. You have a worker. You place this worker on this board, the Black Forest board. And then this worker, Anthony, is going to go from village to village. And depending on what village the worker stops at, there's going to be 3 different shops, workshops that the worker can kind of engage with. And in this case, with the villages, most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, other than the jobs that they go to, they're going to be able to activate 2 buildings, one on the left and one on the right. They have to activate at least one of them. They can activate both of them. These buildings will do a number of different things. Again, it's an Uwe Rosenberg game. It's a game about farming. So basically what you're doing is you are building up your farm. Shocking. But also at the same time, you're gathering resources because you have to produce glass. Also shocking, right? It's also something Uwe Rosenberg's done before too. But again, this game is a much simpler, streamlined version of what we've previously played before with Glass Road. So again, all you're doing with that one worker is journeying around the circle and doing your actions in order to gain resources. Why are you gaining resources? Well, of course, to make glass. and also to have enough of the basic resources that you need in order to build up your farm, right? You like farming, Anthony.
I like farming.
You
Sure, I
do,
like
sure.
farming.
As far as
It's
this bit is concerned, just say yes. I
yeah,
enjoy
I'm
farming.
a lovely farming guy. I love it. Actually, you know what? I did grow up on a farm a little bit.
There you
So,
go. Just not an
uh,
Agricola farm.
no, 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 no. We didn't have to feed our people. We had grocery stores.
There you go.
It wasn't that kind of farm. So, looking at the map of this, is it actually worker placement or is it just a rondel? 'Cause it looks like you're just going in a circle.
You don't have to follow the circle. You can go in any direction you want. But basically, you're right, Anthony. The Black Forest is a rectangle board with 5 different villages, and all of those villages are connected with paths. So you could technically go around in a circle, but you don't need to do that. You can, in fact, stay in the same village and bounce around to different tiles.
Okay. Okay.
So you don't. It's not rondel-ish as far as that's concerned. But yes, I can see a certain rondel-ish to the board.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're blocking spots. It makes sense.
You're
It
blocking
almost
spots.
looks. It's kind of rondelish or the gallerist vibe almost in terms of
Mhm.
like limited spaces. And you got one dude moving around.
Yeah, and there's a market tile building that you're able to move based on paying a particular resource for. So even the villages can get switched up as far as what they're offering. But
Right.
basically, these buildings are very simple. You could take a look at the tiles here, Anthony. They're kind of randomly assigned to each of the different villages. And then you have to pay resources to get other resources of a certain type. Now, here is where Glass Road comes into play because every player is going to have these 2 giant wheels. These big wheels will have the resource tokens on them. And as you gain resources, you'll move the tokens. But as you move the tokens, these wheels have like these clock hands on them. And then the clock hands will move if there's gaps. Why does that matter? What does that do? Well, basically, it's there to simulate production. So, on the resource side, where you have food and coal and porridge and things like that, that wheel's going to move to give you resources in order to take journeys, in order to move to different spots. On the other side, wood and sand and coal, as that particular resources move, it'll automatically produce glass. So in most games, Anthony, you actually have to go to certain spots to produce advanced resources. In this game, you go to basic spots to produce resources. And as the resources grow, those basic resources then automatically, because of the clock wheels turn, because the resources moved, produce the advanced resources. Why does that
Okay.
matter, Anthony? I don't know, but that's how the game plays. Well, basically,
You asked my question for me.
I did, because really what it comes down to is now that you have all these resources, both basic and advanced, you can buy buildings. The buildings go onto your farm, and this is where the kind of tableau building, the tile, kind of orientation really matters because you're going to put boars and cows on your board and they can only go certain spots, but you need to put buildings, but you have forests in the ways. You can kind of cut down the forest, but you also need the forest. So there's a lot of challenges as far as that concerned. And it does allow you to expand your farm, kind of like Feast for Odin. Remember Feast for Odin, anything where you get those extra boards to have all negative points?
I remember it well.
Yes, it's not my favorite part of the game there. But basically, when you get extra boards here, it has resources already on it that you can kind of utilize and also build upon. So
Okay.
your farm grows and allows you to do more things. Basically, you're getting the small buildings to, of course, get the bigger buildings. The bigger buildings will score the most points in the game. And then there's also what they call jobs. And basically, the jobs pop up different spots in the map. And those jobs require a lot of a particular resource. And then in return, it gives you a lot of other resources. So it's a victory point game. You're scoring victory points from building buildings. You're scoring victory points from scoring bigger buildings. And you're scoring victory points because, again, producing glass will help you do a lot of fun stuff. So definitely lighter and definitely easier than Glass Road. Definitely lighter and easier than Ora Labora, that shares a lot of the same mechanics and build. Definitely easier, much, much easier than Feast for Odin, Agricola, Caverna. So it's definitely on the easier, lighter, more gateway, accessible gamer games.
Interesting. I mean, is it as it's not as light as like a Newsfjord or a Reykjolt though, right?
Uh, it's probably around the same weight as a News Ford.
Oh, okay.
Maybe just a little bit heavier because you are dealing with more resources than fish.
Right, yeah, yeah, Newsfjord is 2 resources and then money, that's it.
Yeah, here you have a lot of resources, but I think the wheels, while they look challenging, I think they're kind of ingenious, and I really like the fact that they brought them back
Mhm,
because again, for most gamers, when you play Euro games, it's all about trading a resource to trade a resource to trade a resource to score points.
mhm,
Here, it's gain resources and then automatically, depending on the situation on your wheels, it upgrades automatically to the advanced resources.
mm,
So it really comes down to a Caverna mechanic, Anthony, where it's like, Caverna's all about what are you going to build towards, like what kind of
right,
resources and things. I think the same thing is true here. The building boards are really well laid out, and I really like the idea of like there's basically rows of a particular building set that works for one type of resource. And the same thing's true for the big buildings at the end of the game that you're going to be able to purchase. So based on what you decide you want to go for, Caverna style, that's going to make a big difference too. So if you want to go heavy coal, there's a big building for that. If it randomly comes out, you could build that along with the smaller buildings that kind of support it throughout. So you can build your own strategy, which is nice.
that's cool. Yeah, I mean, it looks very Uwe. I don't know. It's
It's
not quite as overwhelming though as a lot of his games can be, like, that is always a barrier, like, I don't want it to be so overwhelming, I don't want this giant deck of cards that it's impossible to teach somebody how to parse, so I do appreciate that.
Yeah, or Labora is the heavy version of this, then Glass Road, and then Black Forest is on the lighter scale for this.
Okay.
So I think this is really accessible for a large audience. I think there's something we should mention is that there was some production issues with at least the original batch that came out where some of the boards were a little bit warped, the wheel boards.
Mm,
But our kind of preview version of it had a little warp, but nothing that was interfering with the actual gameplay.
that's good.
But it's something to be aware of.
Alright.
Again, if you are looking for a gamer version, I want to put quotes around this. It's not a gateway game. It's a gamer version gateway game to Uwe Rosenberg. As you were mentioning before, Anthony, there are lighter farming games than this, but this is certainly in that kind of 3, 4, 5 kind of like early, easy gateway gamer farming games.
That's a very specific categorization, but that's where we're at with the hobby these days.
Exactly. So
Alright.
so I
If
would
you had to
say
slap a rating on it then, what are we giving it?
I'm gonna give it a play. It's
Alright.
it's it's engaging enough to stick with it, and you can and the buildings themselves have 2 sides, so I think that's a lot of fun. But it 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 can wear out its plays after a couple times too.
Sure.
So, yeah, it's definitely worth playing, so if you see it at a table, sit down and enjoy it. Alright, so that's our roll for review. Anthony, now on to our feature review. Our feature review here is Voice of the Gamers. Choose your table. I feel like we should have a Mortal Kombat theme playing in the background when we do this.
Right. Okay, so we'll snap that clip,
Uh-huh,
and
uh-huh,
we'll add some echo to it,
uh-huh.
and a little bit of dun 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 dun, and then we'll be good.
Choose your table.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So for
We'll just,
choose
like
your table this week, would you choose to sit at a 4-hour epic game table or 4 light 1-hour games? Please show your work, Anthony.
please show your work. Yes, that's what we ask people. Don't just answer the question, tell
No,
us
no, no.
why.
Yeah.
We wanna know why. This is where I stare at my students in the class like, "And?" Like, "What? I answered your question." "No, more, 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 more."
Say more about that.
Say more, please. Yeah, so we asked everybody everywhere, Discord, Blue Sky, Facebook, and on Patreon. We got a ton of answers here. Everybody has an opinion on this one, which is awesome. So if you don't hear your answer read, it's just because we ran out of time. There's so many answers. So just want to say thank you to everybody who wrote in and participated this week. So I think what would be helpful here is understanding first up that this is obviously a very personal choice. Like, what type of games do you like? I think a lot of people interpreted it that way. Like, I like heavy games, therefore I would choose the heavy game. But there are a lot of other factors involved. So I'd like to highlight some of those as we go through. Because some people, they have very specific reasons why one or the other, which makes perfect sense. And I think life circumstances change sometimes to make that, a necessary consideration. I know for me, it's changed a couple times over the years. All right, so kicking things off on the Discord channel, a few answers here. Butler Socks says, "For me, I'd choose the Epic game. I've had much more satisfaction from a 3 to 4 hour 18xx or Splotter or Heavy Euro. There's time for a story to unfold, for narratives to develop. Not saying you can't have an amazing time with 1 hour games, but I like the big game."
Makes sense, especially if the big heavy game is an 18XX.
Right? Yeah. There's a couple ways to get a shorter experience out of that, but nothing like an hour or two. It's just not happening.
And it's going to give you that kind of epic experience.
Right, it's memorable, right?
Yes.
And that's the thing I think that's important here, from at least Butler Sox's responses. We're talking epic,
Yes.
like a singular experience that has a narrative that you can tell stories about later, not just a game that happens to be long, right?
Ooh, that's right.
I remember you and we sat down once, and you'll have to remind me where, but I was visiting, and we went to a game night, and it was Maracaibo. And you were like, "Sure, I guess." And I was like, "I like this game." And you're like, "I guess." And like 4.5 hours later, I'm like, "Oh, that's why you didn't want to play this
That's
game."
right. That's 100% right.
Yeah, because that's not a big epic experience.
No.
It doesn't have a narrative or a story to it. It's a pretty straightforward Euro that just happens to take 4 hours when you're playing with 4 people.
Yes. Kind of like with Terraforming Mars, if you play with a full contingent and an expansion.
Oh,
or two
5
in it.
people. Yeah.
Oof.
Oof, no, thank you. I did it once. It was at a friend's house. It was with all the expansions. They fed us. It was an epic experience because of the people and the location, but not the
Sure.
game.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's an important distinction, I think.
Yes. Not an epic AP experience either.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We're talking about the game. The game is epic,
It's true.
not the time. The time is not epic. All right. Adrian D1 on Discord says, "Since I don't play epic or heavy games, the answer is obviously 4 light 1 hour games."
Makes sense.
I think that's a no brainer. Like, if you don't like long games, obviously you're going to play the shorter ones. And I've had friends like that too, where like they love games, but they just zone out. They cannot handle it after like 2 hours.
Makes sense.
So
Yeah.
you have to keep that in mind. I had a very close friend back in Pittsburgh who was just like, "I can't play War of the Ring with you, can I? Because it's just too much." And we're
Sure.
like, "Yeah, no, it's just not." I'm like, "Okay, fair enough." We're just not going to do that. All right. Epigon on Discord says, "I can play a 1 hour game whenever I have 1 hour. If you give me 4 hours, I'm going for something bigger. Prefer heavy economic games, 18xx, Splotter, some heavy Euros for a 4 hour time slot. And generally speaking, I think the arc of those games create the kind of experience and memories I like most in the hobby."
Nice. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
A lot of love for 18XX this week.
I know. Like, come on, people. We gotta get these to the table more. Gonna add a channel to the Discord, play online. We'll just break Chris's break. Guess what, Chris?
Oh no.
You
What
you're
are
not
you
going to play an 18xx. You're going to do it on the computer.
No, not that. Anything but that.
Oh man! If you want a game that's hard to keep track of asynchronously, it's oof. Wait, where was I going? What was I doing with this money? Why do I have this stock?
It's true.
Yeah. So I mean, again, coming back to experiences and memories,
Sure.
I don't have a lot of like really distinct memories of games that were really short. Right. I have memories of like times like, oh, we were at a convention and we sat down to play this game and we happened to all like it.
Yes.
I remember when I discovered Newsfjord, ironically. It was like 3 random strangers that I was like in PAX's, first look section. And I don't remember where you were, but we sat down to play this. We didn't know each other. And we were like, all of us were like, "Is it over? That was great. That was really condensed. That took an hour and 10 minutes." So that happens occasionally, but all the big stories are like, "I remember this time in TI4, where this guy like threw me under the bus and he convinced everybody else to like attack me, and then he swooped in and won the game, and they were all like, "What the hell, dude?" I remember this other game we were playing Defenders of the Realm, and then it came down to the last die roll, and we were all jumping up and screaming. That was amazing. Like, those are the games that you get those stories.
That's true.
All right. Marion on Discord says, I am an aging granny. I play weekly with a group that ranges in age from 16 to 77.
Nice.
Quite the range. I much prefer 3 or 4 light games in a row. That way, if I get licked in one, I can still get my revenge in the next one. I think this is a big one too. Like, I don't know if you ever have this thought of like, if I'm going to play like a 6-hour game, a 4-hour game, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
if I get stomped on, that's it. That's my day.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Right? Like, what else, does that bother you? Are you cool? You're like, I played the game, I'm fine.
I'm cool with that. I think it's certainly, it depends on the game, because it's hard when you know you're going to get stomped on early on and you have another couple of hours to play.
Right.
Whereas sometimes when you play games that either are brand new to you or games that have a lot of take that to it, I'd rather play the 1-hour games just because I want that experience, and then I want that experience to be done and move
Right.
on to the next thing.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. I always come back to my first play of Food Chain Magnet where I knew I was losing after like 40 minutes.
Oof.
And there was 3.5 hours left in the game, and I was so upset by the end of it. I just left. The game night wasn't even over. I was like, I'm gonna go home. This is not like, I'm in a bad mood now.
This is bad. Oh,
but I liked it. I still liked it despite
Sure.
that.
Yeah, I think again there are certain variations, or variables we have to take into consideration as far as like what games are. But again, if these are, as we kind of state, a 4-hour epic game, I think you do enjoy the epic experience to it, and not just it's a 4-hour game. Because I think a 4-hour game is a different animal altogether.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Whereas a 1
Yeah,
hour whereas a 1-hour game can be a very good 1-hour game, or it could just be 4 1-hour games that are also fine because they'll end.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Also, most 1-hour games don't take an hour.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, if the game is bad for 1 hour, I'm not mad at it because it ended.
Yeah, right.
Because people are like, oh, we could play this in the meantime. I'm never mad at those games that are like, oh, we'll play this in the meantime. It's like, okay, cool, it's cool, it's fine.
Yeah, I guess there's a presumption in this question that that epic game is good. Like,
Yeah, at least I think not necessarily even that it has to be good. It just has to be grand, right? There has to be something grand to it, like either in scale or in the quality of the game itself. So, like you said, Fuche Magnet, an 18XX. I don't know if you can play Eclipse necessarily in 4 hours, but a game like a Civilization game.
right.
A lot of times when you play games, like even when you play Seven Wonders, you don't have control over all the different aspects and players at the table. So a lot of times you just don't win the game because you didn't get the cards and because you couldn't affect other players, but you built some sort of epic civilization. And I think that's somewhat cool. But if you play a 1-hour game, you typically don't get to build something that you get to walk away from and go, oh, that was pretty cool, even though I lost the game.
Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
Or you can play Zaya and build nothing and explode 3 times.
It was epic for some of us. That's all I have to say
Yeah,
about
that's
that.
true. It was memorable. Like, if we're talking about memories, I do remember the game. Very clear memories
That's
of it.
true.
All right, let's move on to a couple more answers here. Becca on Discord says, "I love both options." Yes, there we go. We got somebody who likes both. However, if I have 4 hours and I'm with the right people, I would sit down for a long epic game over 1-hour light games. The longer, more strategic games are harder to get to the table with my busy schedule.
Sure.
Definitely a point in that favor, yeah. While there can be a decent amount of strategy in shorter games, I love the long, drawn-out process of developing a long-term strategy for a more complex game, seeing it unfold over the hours. I really get lost in the game and the adventure.
No, down with that. Great answer. Love that
Yeah,
answer.
I definitely feel that too. Like, I want to feel like I'm building something.
Yes.
Short games, it almost never feels like you're building a thing. Even if you're actually literally building a thing, you're like, and we're done.
The only thing I will say with the short games, we play a lot of these with our friend Game Master Dave, because he always pulls out. He's got like a Swiss Army knife of like little games he pulls out.
Right.
Is the fact that you get to walk away feeling that you played 4 games.
That's true. Yeah, you checked a lot of boxes.
Yes.
You got that dopamine rush, the serotonin multiple times. Like check, 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 check.
Yeah. And when people say, like, what'd you play? Like, oh, I played 4 different games, and typically they're very different types of games.
Hmm.
Whereas, like you said, with your Food Chain Magnet, it can be an epic game, but you could also have a very bad experience and have to sit for it.
Right. And you're like, I was there all day. What'd you do? I played this one game. How was it? It was terrible.
And like, what'd you do? I played these 4 games, and how were they? They were fine. They were fine. Not necessarily bad.
Yeah. Who had more fun? Well, I don't know. Yeah, that's man, it's tough. All right, Tom Bombadil, Discord, 4-hour epic game. I got plenty of light gameplay because there are types of games my family prefers.
Yes.
It's the epic games that I don't get to play as much. This is where I land at this point. I do play a decent amount of games at home, but it's mostly with my kids, and typically like individually because they don't often want to play together. So a lot of 2-player games that take an hour or less. Um, so if I have longer to play
Mm-hmm.
with adults such as yourself, let's play a long game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, I think for the small game side too, sometimes we think of those games as like the child games, the lighter games, but sometimes they can be fairly complex, but maybe they just end a little bit early. Maybe like the Duke. The Duke,
Oh, sure.
the Duke is a pretty quick game, but also pretty strong. Or you play like Hive.
Yeah.
Hive is a very complex, small, quick game.
Yeah, yeah. Or like a collectible card game or something.
Oh yeah,
Like there's a lot of complexity in like a game like Magic or Star Wars or any of these. And those typically take, 30, 40 minutes.
yeah. We had a friend of ours, Champ. He often would say he wouldn't play double 18 double X game because he just would rather get more games to the table. And that's
Sure.
fair. Like that's just you just win that argument just right there in some cases.
Right. Yeah. Like for me, there's like a line, and I don't know where the line is, but there's a line at which a game becomes an event game.
Mm,
Like
sure.
4-hour epic does it's not even quite there, but like a TI4. The last time I played TI4, it took us 5.5 hours. I've played games at game night that took 5.5 hours, but I would never play TI4 at game night. Like, no, no, no. We have to schedule time. There has to be a meal. Everybody has to watch the rules. Got to set up everything. It's got to be at someone's house. It can't be in public. Like
Yeah,
everything needs to be right because that game could be 9
it
hours,
can.
right?
Sure.
Um, Same with an 18xx game. I would never just throw that on the table at a game night. Like it has to be planned and scheduled and organized. So it's not even an option really. You don't have 2 tables. It's like, no, we're just doing this.
Yeah, I guess if you had a let's say 2.5 hour game, give or take, like I was mentioning SETI, or Unconscious Mind, and then you have new players or you have to do a teach, it can easily be a 4-hour epic game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. I remember you told me like said he was 2.5 hours. I was very surprised. I'm like, that's quick.
Yeah, but also at the same time, those players had watched videos and stuff like that
You
too.
skip the teach. It speeds it up.
Yeah, so they all just jumped in and played and did whatever they did. So
Yeah. All right. Let's see what else everybody else has to say. I think we've touched on a lot of points, but
Mhm.
there's a few more. We have a lot more answers. So let's go through a few more of these. Over on the Patreon, we have Jonathan says 4-hour epic, no doubt. It's just so rare that I get to play a game this long at all, except for every 2-week D&D game.
Mm,
That is another one of those like outliers that I think we don't think of. But yeah,
sure.
D&D, big epic. As noted previously, you get something to remember from a long game. Yep, the memories.
Yeah, those one
Uh,
shot D&D stuff is fine, but you always feel like you want the longer
oh my gosh,
campaign.
yeah. I It's been years. I gotta find a campaign. Um, Ryan on Patreon says, I would definitely choose the 4-hour epic, but I think 4 hours would be the upper limit of how long I'd want to play one game. Beyond that, I prefer to split that much time into two-hour games or so. We've played some long games of 4-player Terraforming Mars, Clank Legacy, and On Mars, and they've always been great experiences. So I think Ryan kind of hits on that point we're talking about. Like some games are long without necessarily being epic, and there is an upper limit to where we want to go with that.
Makes sense.
Drew mentions, yes, 4-hour epics, though I do enjoy the puzzle and brevity of shorter games. They rarely spark the memorable moments. Yep, absolutely. Bunch of answers over on Facebook. So we got some fun ones here. Uriel says there are games that last less than 4 hours.
Love it.
Yeah, I love your life, man. um, we have Vagard says if the 4 light short games are trick taking games, then I would choose the 4 trick taking games. In other cases, I would always choose the 4-hour epic, of course. We have Bryant says the epic game is my preference. I'm much more likely to come away with a great memory or moment. Gabriel says, epic game. For me, it's memorable and exciting. Gives some examples: 1846, 1817, Fief 1429, and Virgin Queen.
Mm-hmm.
Some good long games there. Daniel says, no light games, please. Just no light games. All right. You're on the right podcast, Daniel. Dave, we just mentioned Game Master Dave. He has some light games in his pocket, but he says 4-hour epic game.
All right,
So,
Dave.
We gotta get one to the table, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Make it happen. David says, for me, games are about immersion, so I would be happy with either, but I would prefer an epic 4-hour game and getting completely lost in the game and the people I'm playing with. And then David Bator says, 4-hour epic if I'm playing with good friends, all interested in the long epic game. For later games with people I don't know that well. So I think that's a really good point that hadn't come up yet. Who are you playing with?
Oh, no.
Yeah. I don't want to play almost any of these big epic games with people I don't know
Sure.
or that haven't. And if I don't know most of them, but I know one of them, that's fine as long as we can vouch for each other. But like, has everybody learned the rules? Are we all kind of in the same boat? Is somebody going to be teaching this game? Are they going to be teaching this game poorly? Like, those are all things I'd like to keep in mind. I remember the first time I played Arkwright, we played the short version, and it still took like 6 hours, and it was just because the person had never played the game and they were kind of stumbling through the rule book. It was at a coffee shop. It was not a great experience, and I would not do that again. So,
You're talking about,
situation matters.
Are you talking about Barrage? Is that what you're talking about?
No, Arkwright.
Okay, I'm just bringing.
I mean, I am talking about Barrage now that you mentioned it. That was a terrible experience too.
Well,
and that was also like 4 or 5 hours.
Again, if you are walking into a situation where there are two tables and there's two sets of games kind of set up, either one long 4-hour game and 4 individual games, and again, you can't necessarily pick the players to play, the 4 individual 1-hour games might be a safer bet.
Yeah.
Because again, you can play, those games are short. You can get in and out of them. You can have different experiences with them. And sometimes when you play the 4-hour games, again, depending on the randomness of the people, which we do not know in this case, we got to be fair. The people were not mentioned. Maybe the 4 individual 1-hour games is a safer, better bet.
Yeah, like if you're just playing the odds, I would probably, in a completely strange environment with nobody I know, I would roll with shorter games. But if I'm hosting, I'm not inviting anybody who won't play the long games, so it's all good.
It's true. All right, well, there you go, everybody. Thank you for your suggestions, your opinions, your verses. And I think generally, Anthony, we come to a general consensus here. So if you're going to choose your table between a 4-hour epic game or 4 light 1-hour games, the winner is the 4-hour epic game.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Almost exclusively, with maybe 2 exceptions. Everybody's like epic all the way.
Yeah, asked and answered. Again, we'd like to thank you all for joining us here. Until next time, this is Chris.
And this is Anthony.
And we'll save you all a seat at the table. Take care, everybody.
Bye.